It is a warm summer evening in New York City. At the station, Michael was taking a rest on the track when Dennis pulled up beside him. Dennis was in quite the sour mood, and so he rudely blew his horn loudly, which made Michael rattle with surprise. "Hey, who rattled your rods?" Michael asked crossly. "This morning I was on my usual route taking passengers to Grand Central when suddenly I came across a diesel engine that had broken down on the track," Dennis sneered. "It took them like 2 hours to finally get that lousy engine out of my sight." "Was it Salvatore? Come on, Dennis, you know that he's an old engine. He's worked for the New York subway system for nearly 100 years, said Michael. Dennis rolled his eyes. "My point exactly. Old engines do nothing but break down and get in the way of us newer engines," said Dennis. This made Michael cross. He couldn't believe that his own friend could be so disrespectful to older engines. But before he could say anything, the subway manager walked up to Dennis. "Dennis, I have an important job for you. You are to take a goods train full of engine parts to the steam engine unit near Albany," said the subway manager. Dennis was cross. He did not like steam engines. He thought they were too outdated to be of any use. But he knew he couldn't argue with the subway manager, and so he reluctantly took the job. Dennis thundered down the line with his long goods train. Dennis was determined to get his job over with as soon as possible, and so he started going really fast, far beyond the intended speed limit. Dennis was going so fast that when he came up to a junction, he barely had time to stop. "Oh my, you're going quite fast there, old sport," said a voice. Dennis looked around and saw a small red tank engine sitting on the right track in front of him. "My name is Fernando. Who are you?" the engine asked. "I'm Dennis." Dennis was already feeling annoyed with Fernando. "Don't mind me, I'm just here to make a delivery of engine parts to a warehouse down that track over there," Dennis said, directing his gaze to the left track. Fernando looked worryingly at Dennis. "Be careful," he said. "That track is very old and not very stable. If you go down it at the speed you were just at, you are sure to have an accident of some kind." Dennis didn't want to take advice from an old steam engine, and so he simply brushed it off. "Nonsense, old-timer. I am a high-tech express subway engine, and I don't need an old, worn-out steam engine to tell me what to do." Fernando sighed. "Suit yourself then, but don't say I didn't warn you." Dennis began making his way down the old rickety track, leaving Fernando feeling hurt and worried. At first, Dennis went down the line with relative ease. "See, there's nothing at all wrong with me going down this track fast. That old engine has no idea what he's talking about," Dennis thought to himself, and so he began to pick up more and more speed. Then there was trouble. Up ahead, Dennis saw a sharp bend. He applied his brakes, but all he did was skid and slide across the old slippery rails. "Oh no!" cried Dennis. He closed his eyes and hoped for the best, but it was no use. Luckily, no one was hurt, but all Dennis could do was just lay there, stuck. He felt very foolish. "Oh no, this is a disaster," moaned Dennis. "Fernando was right. Those tracks really are not that stable. I should have just listened to him and went slowly." Dennis looked left and right and listened as hard as he could, but there was nobody there to help him. Suddenly, Dennis could hear puffing from behind him. It was Fernando! He came up to the crash site and stopped. "Well, well, are you still in no need of this old worn-out steam engine's advice now?" Fernando asked. He was not very surprised to see Dennis in that state, and Dennis knew that all too well. "I'm sorry, Fernando," moaned Dennis. You were right. I really should have gone slower, and I never should have called you old and worn out. Fernando smiled. I appreciate it, Dennis, he said. Just do me a favor and never judge an engine, or anyone for that matter, by their age again. Once Dennis's goods train had been cleared away, Fernando ordered his driver and fireman to hook a rope up from his back buffer all the way to Dennis's back buffer. Then slowly, using all of the strength that he had, Fernando began to pull. Dennis is a very heavy engine, and Fernando is a very old engine. His cheeks began to turn as red as his paintwork, but he didn't dare give up. And eventually, Fernando managed to get Dennis back onto the tracks and take him all the way down to the repair yard. About a week went by, and Dennis came back from the works as good as new. Michael was happy to see his friend again. "Glad to have you back, Dennis," said Michael. "Well, it's great to be back, Michael," said Dennis. "But you know what? I wouldn't be back so soon if it weren't for my new friend Fernando over here." Michael was a little surprised. "Oh, I thought you weren't a fan of old engines. What changed?" "Well, let's just say a wise little tank engine taught me that you should never judge someone by their age, because no matter how old you are, you can still be very useful." And both Michael and Fernando, each of them smiling from buffer to buffer, couldn't agree more.